Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are back on the Franken-Hauler and starting to move some things around.
So let's take a second before we get started. We have partnered with MyHeritage for this week's video. And for those of you who don't know, Jeff and I are super into history. So if you're interested in finding out about your family background, maybe your DNA, where you've come from, finding those relatives you didn't know you had, you are going to love MyHeritage. So first of all, MyHeritage have committed in their privacy policy to never sell or license genetic data. So you can rest assured that your information will remain confidential. Okay, super easy to use. You will receive a kit in the mail, and then all you need to do, just going to do it now, is you're going to take a swab of the inside of your mouth. Once I've done that, I simply put it into the container and in the packaging that MyHeritage have provided, set it all up and send it off. And wait for the results. Okay, so it's been a few weeks and my results are here, and I've been waiting all day to open them. I'm so excited. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Watch. Okay, that is totally unexpected. Absolutely for the English. That's sort of what I was expecting. A little bit of Irish, Scottish and Welsh. But Middle Eastern, totally unexpected. I would never have guessed that was part of my DNA. So you've got your overview, you've got your ethnicity estimate, and of course you've got DNA matches. So I can see immediately that I have two parents' first cousins who have shown up and another parent's second cousin as well, and yeah, a whole bunch of second cousins that I didn't know about. So MyHeritage has a promotion right now, so you can either click the link in the description box or scan the QR code on the screen, and don't forget to use the coupon code for free shipping. All right, so thank you once again to MyHeritage. This has been absolutely fascinating. I would never have guessed about that Middle Eastern connection. Great to find out about the English background as well, and also that Irish, Scottish and Welsh in there too. So back to the video.
All right guys, welcome back. And those of you who were watching last week saw that I finished removing all of the bus from the chassis. So now it is just the underpinnings, the bits that I actually want to keep here. And I brought up a whole bunch of concepts. I was a little bit stressed out, and I got talked off the ledge by Benny and Jay, a couple of mates, and I have a bit more of a plan moving forward. Now, there were a whole ton of questions, and thank you very much to all you guys that commented. And if you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up with that last episode. And like always, please like and comment. That stuff really helps the mysterious algorithm. And yeah, thank you for all your engagement last week. That was fantastic. Before I start going through some of your comments, let me just strip this back a little bit more. I think we need to remove this air box and fit the guard on this side, and then we can start showing you roughly where things sit. Now we actually have the front guards on and sort of get a bit more of an idea of the layout of the truck. And like I mentioned, there were a whole heap of comments in last week's video, suggestions when I went through my sort of initial plans of moving the engine and all that sort of thing. Because as you may still see here in shot, we actually have the radiator and everything well in front of the engine, and obviously that is not going to work. So there were a heap of comments, but some of the comments were, can I just move the cab further forward and change where this wheel arch opening is, and maybe even get a cab over type of front end and to sort of modify this cab to actually be a cab over cab. The cab over cab is a very similar cab, but the wheel cuts into the door roughly around this area here, and it sits up further forward. Now, even Jay at Low Standards, who I showed you the picture of his modified coaster from last week, he had to move the engine back as well. Even with a cab over, the bus engine just sits so far forward. It basically, it's a full front engine car sitting in front of the front wheels. So it's just sits too far forward, and we need to move it back. So modifying the bodywork and stuff like that, if I can get a cab over, it'd be great, but I'd still have to move the engine anyway. And they're just really hard to find in Australia. They're not something that's readily available, and definitely not cheap. And I've done so much of this cab already. Like, it's just, we're sticking with this cab, we're sticking with this chassis, so that's not it. Now, people said, yeah, can I just move the cab forward and just change the metalwork, keep the forward bonnet and everything? It's just going to look weird, and I don't want to extend the nose or anything silly like that. That would just look wrong. And yes, I could do it. I'm sure I could play around with the metalwork and improve my metalwork skills, but it just wouldn't look right, and that's not something I want. I want it to still look like a Ford truck. So that's out. The biggest one that I got a million times, because I was mentioning of moving the entire driveline backwards. And a lot of people were saying, wouldn't it just be easier to move the front axle forwards? The short answer is no, and surprisingly no. I did look at it initially, and it's a lot more complicated than it first seems. Let me take you through and I'll show you now. So if we're having a look here at the engine bay, if I was going to either move the engine mounts rearwards or move the axle forwards, I still have to remove the engine to do that. So either way, the engine's coming out, and I've got things to do on the engine anyway. So whatever I do, the engine is coming out. So that's not part of it. Now, to move, if it was just this one subframe, it wouldn't be a crazy amount of work maybe, but there's more to it. There are so many bits that need to move. We've got attachment points for the control arms, and this has torsion bars. So there's torsion bar mounts all the way back here that have to move. There's also the drag link that would need to move. There are so many things connected to the front axle, whereas if I did move the rear axle, I would have to move these bearing carriers. But again, there's just it's just a C channel that I can unpick and slide these back. That's not that big a deal. And the rear axle, a lot of people were worried that if I moved the rear axle rearward, it wouldn't fit in the arch. I'm only talking about moving it about 240 mil, about to here. So the axle would still fit in the hump. It would still be within the hump. I don't have to extend the hump. I don't have to cut and extend the chassis. The whole thing would just be moving the mounts rearward. But I'm still not sold on whether I'm going to do that or not. But let's move back to the front for a second. So the things I need to do when I'm moving the engine back is really just move the engine mounts and change the mounts for the radiator and things like that, which I'm probably going to have to do anyway. All right, now for the steering. Now my original plan was sort of a non-starter. What I was originally going to do is basically the way this steering works is we have the steering box here. It has I believe this is the Pitman arm that comes down from the steering box, and that connects to this, which is a drag link. So that drag link goes back to this pivot here, and when you turn the steering, it moves this arm backwards and forwards, which translates into this arm here, which goes from either side, and that connects to the wheel and turns the wheels left and right. I've got a bit of a diagram here of how it works originally, and originally my plan was to get this arm and flip it over and go backwards and connect it up to the same steering box just on the other side, and it would still be turning in the same direction just with the arm on the other way, but there is no way to get it through all of the suspension and everything here. There would be no way to do that easily, so that is out. The other option I was thinking of is I could mount this drag link to a pivot here, remove this steering box rearward, engineer up a pivot here that another drag link would connect to, and this drag link would lock these two arms together, and they both go backwards and forwards together. Another arm going back up this way, and I could fit the arm through. There's a little whale pocket. I could fit it through the suspension. But that is overcomplicating things, because there is actually legal engineered legal steering shafts that you can buy for hot rods that have got engineering with the knuckles, and it's a D shaft that I can run through, connect up, and then connect that up to the original Toyota steering up there. So basically I can do a legal engineered approved steering extension just up to the cab, and I'm good, all good there. So that is my plan with the steering. So now we move to the part that the jury is still out on. So last week I mentioned the idea of potentially moving the entire rear axle rearward that same distance, that 240 mil that I'm going to move the engine backwards. But it does create a whole bunch more work. Like I said before, we've got to move these plates here rearwards to be able to hold the carrier bearings and all the axle mounts and everything. And that is a lot more work than just shortening the tail shaft. Part of my reason for not wanting to shorten the tail shaft is if I can do it myself and save some money, I can do that. But one of the big reasons was to get enough tray length to actually carry my cars. So I've done my rough measurements with the cab roughly in place. Now it's not locked down, but it's pretty close to where it's going to be. And I have roughly 2.2 meters from the cab to the center of the rear axle. Now, I've had a look, and the tray I want to put on is about 4.5 meters long. This is the 4.5 meter tray, would come all the way back to about here. Now, it gives me roughly 50% either side of the rear axle of the tray. And obviously, when you load a car on, you're going to load it engine side, this side. The heavy bit is going to be in the middle. It's not going to be at the back. And the law, as far as New South Wales go, from what I gather, is you are allowed to have up to 60% of the wheelbase behind the rear axle. So that's the length you're allowed to have overhang behind the rear axle. So my wheelbase on this truck, from my measurement, is about 3.9 meters. So it actually is not a huge wheelbase for the length of the overall truck, or the bus as it was. And at 3.9 meters, 60% of that is 2340. So I've got 2.34 meters to go back, and I want about 2.3 roughly for the back of the tray. So that should be enough. And all of my cars are actually not are less than 4.5 meters anyway. They're 4.3, I think, is the Rockster, so which is probably the biggest vehicle that I would be carrying on here. So that all fit, no problems. So I think there's room here for the tray as the axles sit. I think it would look better as an overall design if the axle was back a little bit further. But moving it back that 200 millimeters adds a whole lot more complications that could possibly be an issue later. And that's something that I want to just watch out for. Whereas shortening the tail shaft is easy. It's not really very expensive, and it's probably going to save me a heap of work. So at this stage, I'm moving back more towards leaving the axle where it is, leave the bearing carriers where they are, just move the engine mounts and the gearbox mounts back, and then I don't have to really touch that much. It's going to keep the job relatively simple, and yeah, we can actually move forward without too much stress. Hopefully that covers most of the comments. Sorry, no, there was one more suggestion that I forgot. Let me go back to forward, and let's just discuss that last one. Now, the last suggestion was not actually a bad idea that could work. potentially, is because the engine is quite low and I've got sort of 400 millimeters or so above the engine, I could potentially remove the radiator completely and place it up here higher, or place ones either side or something like that and put thermofans on them. But ultimately I'm going for something that is just dead simple, reliable, that parts are everywhere, and I don't have to worry about it. It would possibly work. The front pulley would be sitting sort of further forward than the front of the nose slightly. I'd have to trim into the back of it. I could probably just about make it fit, but I want this hauler to be dead reliable, really simple, parts everywhere. Like I mentioned, this is a Land Cruiser engine, Toyota Land Cruiser, which is one of the most common vehicles, particularly away from suburbia in Australia. The parts for these are ubiquitous. It's absolutely everywhere. It's easier to get parts for this than probably anything else, I said, particularly sort of out bush or away from the cities. So if I can keep it all standard, just do that, and it will look, just the engine bay and everything will also look better and work better and everything if I move it all rearwards, because I do have other plans for the engine moving forward as well. And yeah, final thing I just remembered is also there are a few comments about if I move the engine back, what about the sump of the engine? Is that going to interfere with the cross member? And yes, it is. But thankfully, like I mentioned, this is a Toyota Land Cruiser engine, and Toyota Land Cruisers have a rear sump. So I can move this back and hopefully order an off-the-shelf rear sump that I can just swap in. It should all work just with the engine back a little bit further than what it currently is. All right, radiator's out, and what I've got now, there's this original, all right, radiator's out, and along the lines of trying to save as much work for myself in the future as I can, this is like a distribution block for the clutch and brake lines. There's 3 lines in and 4 lines out. The 2 lines that are branched together are for the front. I think I can reuse this in the cab later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this off because I have heaps more lines than I need, because the lines come all the way to the front here, and they actually, in the end, can move all the way back to where the cab will be. So I can potentially even just reuse these lines, just reflare them and connect them again. But for the time being, I'll cut them nice and long, so I've got plenty of space, but I can keep them out of the way and move forward. So once I've got the brake lines out of the way, I move all of the wiring away and just start stripping everything back from the engine. So remove the brake lines, remove the power steering, go through and disconnect all of the electrical components connected to the engine, which on this very simple engine is actually not that much. And then disconnect the tail shaft from the back of the gearbox, which also happens to be the handbrake drum. And finally unbolt the exhaust from the exhaust manifold. All right, I've moved all of the wiring loom out of the way and disconnected all of the wiring. I've disconnected the tail shaft down here, and I've undone the exhaust off of there, and everything else is basically stripped back. It is a very simple engine. There's not that much to it. I've labelled everything. I go through and yeah, label all the wiring, label everything I've disconnected, so I make it easy to put it back together again. So now I need to go through, and I've just got 2 engine mount bolts and 2 gearbox bolts down there, and we should be able to lift this engine out. So let's see how we go. All right, and we have the engine out. It's on the ground. We have a clear chassis, and it's going to make things so much easier to start playing around with. Obviously, we've got to move engine mounts. We've got to just double check our measurements, make sure that I can move everything where I want to move it, and just get a bit of a plan moving forwards. All right, so the engine's out, and a big issue that I'm still having, seeing as this now weighs very little, is I still can't push it, even pushing the tyre. And that's a tip for guys working in the workshop. If you're trying to push your vehicle around, if you push from the top of the tyre, you're actually getting 2-to-1 advantage. So you're actually getting extra leverage by pushing on the top of the tyre. And even with that, I can barely move it. And I think I have an idea why. Obviously, there's now no handbrake connected, because the handbrake is actually on the tail shaft connected to the gearbox, which is I've actually disconnected. So there's no handbrake. This thing should just wheel backwards and forwards like nothing, but it's not. And I suspect it may be the rear left-hand wheel, because I did notice when I was trying to move it backwards and forwards in the workshop, it was actually spinning the right-hand rear wheel, and that was really odd because there's no load on it. It should just move. So I'm thinking there might be something locked up on that rear wheel. So let's go around there now, see if I can jack it up and see if I can try and work out what's going on, because this is really annoying.
So to have better access to the rear axle, it was easier, I thought, to remove all of the remaining bus components from the rear of the chassis. So first off, the fuel tank. Then it's a matter of disconnecting all the electrical connections, etc. from the last piece of floor. And now there's absolutely nothing left of the bus.
All right, fuel tank's off, so what I might do is I'm going to raise up the rear wheel now and just try and... I'll raise up the whole rear axle, and I'm thinking I'm probably going to be able to easily turn those wheels by hand, but these I think are going to be stiff and tight, and I think that's what my issue is. So let's see how it goes. Yeah, look at that. That's rock. And so is that. All right, these wheel nuts are far too tight for the basic tools I've got at the moment. I'm going to need something heavier to crack them open. So I'm going to leave this at the moment, and I think let's go back over and work on the engine, because yeah, I'm not moving this anywhere at this stage. For some reason, this axle is locked still. I can't work out whether it's the brakes are on. I think potentially the drums are ratcheted out too tight, and they need to be ratcheted back again. That's something I can do if I can get the wheels off, but for now, let's have a look at the engine.
So before we do anything with the engine, we need to clean it up. So I'm going around and just covering up any of the hoses, or basically any of the entries to the engine, so that I can pressure wash it and not get water all through it.
All right, we have a nice clean engine out of the truck and everything stripped back, pretty much ready to go. But I really need to get this thing rolling so I can roll the chassis out and give that a good clean as well. But I can't do that until I can get the rear wheels off. So I'm going to have to go and get myself a torque multiplier, which is just a basic tool that will help me crack the wheel nuts on this old truck. I use this nice big long extension bar, and I still could not crack the nuts. So I think the torque multiplier is the tool to use. I also need to go and order myself a sump for this engine, because I need to get that so I can line everything up. So we're in a good spot. We are stripped back as far as we need to go now. I should be able to go through and clean up this entire chassis now, get rid of all of the gunk off of it, and get it ready to start moving engine mounts, start building cab mounts. all that sort of thing. But that is all the time we have this week. So I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, in 1906, the average life expectancy in the US was 47 years. Only 14% of households had a bath. The average wage was 22 cents an hour. And the tallest structure in the world was the Eiffel Tower. It was also in this year that Ford released the Model K. This was the total opposite of Henry Ford's vision to create affordable cars for the masses. The Model K was a large, powerful luxury car with a large 6.6 litre 40 horsepower, straight 6-cylinder engine, which was the only 6-cylinder engine that Ford produced until 1941. It cost between $2,500 and $3,000, which was 5 times the price of the Ford Model N, but it was still the cheapest 6-cylinder in the world. By the end of its run, arguments between Ford and other shareholders over the direction of the company caused some to leave, allowing Ford to become the largest shareholder and also president of the company. Contrary to the popular belief that the Ford Model K was actually the company's first flop, it sold very well, producing 85% of Ford's profit in 1906. It was only offered for 3 years and around 900 examples were built. It is believed that there are only 23 of these still in existence today.
All right, well, I've actually been thinking about it, and I actually woke up in the middle of the night. My brain's always going in the middle of the night, and I often solve issues. And I'm thinking possibly my brake option issue could maybe be something to do with the vacuum system. I know a lot of big trucks have air-operated brakes, and if you lose air pressure, the brakes lock on, like it's a safety feature. So I'm not sure whether that has something to do with it, or whether it's just really tight and the drums are over tight in the back. I could probably jack the front up and check that out. But either way, we're definitely completely stripped down now. There is nothing left on this chassis. I just need to get it out, clean it up, and we can start working on the mods. I've got a bunch of parts ordered, and yeah, it's coming together.
So all this time, all these sleepless nights while I've been slumbering peacefully next to you, that's when the magic happens, isn't it? Okay.
And thanks again to MyHeritage for sponsoring this episode.
Head over and check it out, and it is really fascinating to find out.
Yes, make sure, again, use the link in the description and the promo code Jeff for free shipping.
Like and subscribe if you haven't. Let Jeff know what you think. As always, we love to read your comments. And Patreon if you want to help them out. See the videos also a day early, no ads. Woohoo.
All right.
It's very windy.
It's extremely cold and windy today. Yeah.
So yeah, very windy.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's not too noisy, but yeah.
All right,
See you
guys.
soon.
See you next time. And should you also say maybe the average wage was 22 cents an hour?
I hadn't put it there, if you had written it.
I hadn't written it, but I'm just thinking.
Let's stop. Hey guys, in 1906 in the US, the average life expectancy was Hey guys, only 40% of households had a bathtub. No, I stuffed it up. Let me do it again. Producing over 85% of the Ford's